Good morning. What a beautiful week. I think we've been spoiled though. Listen, how many of you young people are excited about school? Isn't that wonderful? Some of you have already started back. Some of you start back tomorrow. It's just wonderful, isn't it? I don't hear much. Okay. Well, listen, I am excited about some things that have been going on in our church. We were to have baptism last Sunday, and I spoke about evangelism last Sunday, and then the storms came up at the last kind of second, and so we've moved it to today at 6 o'clock, and we're looking forward to that today. And so along with what it means to become a follower of Christ, it's you're supposed to grow as a follower. We have this church word, it's called discipleship. You don't use that much outside of church, but it is an important part of what it means to be a Christian. And I don't know, people have different things that they're crazy and interested in, okay? For instance, some of you are car people, okay? And if your car gets dented, it's a big, big deal, okay? Some of us aren't, okay? And it's just the way it is. Well, I read this story by this guy named John Ortberg, who is a great fella. He's a pastor. And he was talking about how he was parking in this parking lot. And when he was leaving the parking lot, as he was pulling out, he heard metal scraping on metal as he backed up. And you know that sound is not a pleasant sound, but it wasn't really loud. And so he got out of his car and he looked, and there was just a little line. It wasn't a dent. It wasn't a crumple. It was almost decorative, according to John. Okay. But it was another person's car, and they weren't there, so we left a note. And I have to say this, because this is an important part of the story. It was an Italian car. It rhymes with the word terrari. And so he left a note. And he got a call back later that day. Imagine if that happened to you. And the guy called on the phone, and he said, I appreciate your note, but I just need you to know that I need this car in its original condition because this car is my baby. And Ortberg said, okay. And he called back the next day. And he says, I want you to know I took it to the shop, and the defect in my car cannot be buffed out. And the panel needs to be replaced, the whole door panel. And Ortberg said, okay. He called back the next day, and he said, I need you to know it can't be replaced by the shop that I took it into, and it has to be replaced by the dealer, and the dealer is in Italy. And so Ortberg said, okay. And he called back the next day, and he said, you know, this has bothered me so much. I'm going to get rid of this car, and I'm going to buy a brand new car. You don't owe me anything. And Ortberg said, okay. And he said, by the way, if it's an old car and you don't want it anymore, could I have it? Nope. But, you know, what is your baby? What is the thing in your life that you want? This is my treasure. And, you know, there's a warnings in the Bible about having the wrong treasures. It says in different places in the Bible, put your treasure where moth or rust, you know, can't corrode it, or thieves break in and steal it. And so the Bible talks about what your treasure should be, and it uses a little word that we don't use it that much the way I think the Bible talks about it. The word is soul. Soul. In Mark 8:36, Jesus says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit what? Their soul. Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And so today I want to talk about, what is this part of you spiritually that you need to nurture and take care of. And what is the soul? There is a model for this that I think has been helpful me to see it. I've got a picture of what makes up a person. Okay, well, first, what makes up a person, if you can't see this, it's kind of hard to read. The inner part of our life is the will. Are you a person with strong willpower? We like to watch the Alone show about people going and being dropped off alone in the wilderness and seeing who can last the longest. And some people have really strong wills. I know a lot of y'all, if you were dropped off in the wilderness with nothing, you would last forever, wouldn't you? No, but some people do. In fact, some of the people in the show have to be taken out of the wilderness because they're going to die because they haven't eaten. One guy lasted about 2 hours because he was afraid of bears. Okay, but there's the willpower as part of who you are. I don't know what your willpower is like. And then there's the mind, your thoughts, your mental capacity, how you think. That's part of who you are. Then there is the emotions. You know, there's the part of you that's kind of linked with the mind. Then there's the body. We are bodies. And our bodies are part of who we are. We're linked to them, okay? And so you have all these different parts, and then there's the relationships that you're a part of. That's who you are. But at the outside, that encompass everything else is the soul. The soul integrates your mental, emotional, your will, your relationships, everything that you are is encapsulated by your soul. You could say the soul is the operating system of your life. And so I'm asking, are you taking good care of your soul? How's your soul doing today? Some people have really good treasures that they love, like a fancy car, and they want to keep it perfect. But, what are you doing with your soul? In Matthew 28, verse 19 through 20, we used these same verses last week, but we're emphasizing something else this week. The Great Commission that Jesus gives when he was going back to heaven. He says after his crucifixion and being around folks for a while, he said to his disciples, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We're baptizing today, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. And so the idea here is that God wants us to grow our souls to become more than we are. We ought to have that. That's a treasure for us. And I think we forget about this. And a lot of times people can be successful in one area of their lives, but their soul is withered. And although they look like they're great, and by the way, this is not just some people, this is all of us. Sometimes we look okay, but we're not okay. I remember seeing a tree in my community. This isn't the tree, but this is a picture of a healthy looking tree. But there was a storm and it fell over. I got another picture, and this is what was the inside of the tree. It looked great. It wasn't great. In your life today, how would you say your soul is doing? What condition is it in? I'm not asking you how you're doing at work or how you're doing as a parent or how you're doing as a student, but how is your soul going? That thing that encapsulates your mind and your emotions and your will and your relationships. This is in the Christian world, we talk about this as discipleship. How are you growing your soul? And so what I'm going to talk about today, 3 things, real simple. What is a disciple? How do you grow as a disciple? And what keeps you from growing? And this is all about your soul. How does that happen? So what is a disciple? What is a person who is growing in the faith? A disciple is this, basically. A disciple is a learner who follows a master teacher. If you're going to learn how to do anything, if you're going to learn how to be a mechanic, you find somebody who's a professional mechanic and you kind of learn from them. You see how they do it, what they don't do, how they organize their tool chest, whatever it might be. You learn from that master mechanic. It involves imitating the life of the person that's the teacher, adopting their values and reproducing their teachings. This is how you become a disciple of Jesus. You imitate his life. There used to be these bracelets people wore called WWJD, stood for What Would Jesus Do? And you're supposed to imitate Jesus' life. You think in whatever situation you're in, what would Jesus do? You adopt the values of Jesus and reproduce his teachings. Luke 6:40 says this, the student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. And so if you're taking care of your soul, if you're going through discipleship in your life, you're becoming more like Jesus. You're adopting his values, and that you're not, you're trained to be like Jesus. When you come to the point in your life where you feel you turn your life over to God, each person is faced with the choice to exchange the God of his or her life with the true God. All of us worship something. Every human being worships something. It might be their looks. It might be something that they want to attain. It might be something, some skill, whatever it might be. You worship something. I talked to somebody the other day. It had like 3,000 albums in their covers, okay? Remember record albums? And I said, you got a record player? And he said, I got 4 or 5 of them. They're old rebuilt stereos with a wall of speakers, it's just marvelous. I would love it, but what about our soul? It takes a lot to be a disciple. It talks in the Bible a lot about the cost of becoming a follower of Christ. And Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily. Now, in the world where Jesus lived, people being killed by crucifixion was common. It was common to be walking somewhere. They didn't have, vehicles, walking somewhere and see people crucified by the side of the road. It was not an efficient way of killing somebody. It was a way of torturing somebody and killing them. And so this word, the cross daily, would have been a very emotional thing to say, I want you to take up your cross and follow me. And we talk about that sometimes in church, but we don't talk about sometimes what is the cost of not following Christ. If you're going to follow something else, there's a price too. What is the cost of not following Christ? It is great as well. And so today I want to talk more about, now that is what a disciple is. How do you grow as a disciple? One of our purposes as a church is to have people, our mission statement is to have people come into the church, to lead them to God, to connect them to God, to grow them in their faith. And so how do you grow a disciple? Well, I'm going to tell you about my experience. My experience is when I didn't grow up going to church, and so when I first started going to church, I got involved with this group of young people. And we did sports together. It was a sports team, and I played third base, okay? Back then, I could play, okay? And I got involved, and I went to camp, and at camp, I came to hear about Jesus for the first time, and I turned my life over to Christ. I was baptized, and they gave me this book. It was called The Survival Kit for New Christians. It was actually a pretty good book. I think it's out of print now because I'm old. But here's another picture of it. It was about this size, and in it, it told you how to have a quiet time. It told you how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to do these basics of what it meant to be a Christian. They had a children's edition. When I was a youth minister, we used it. Anybody who was baptized got this book, and you would go over it with them. And so that was one process that, by the way, it's out of print now, which I wish we had something as good. But it was clearly, this is how you get started, okay? Then as I grew in my faith, I came across something called the Navigator's Wheel, okay? And it looks like this, okay? And so go to the next slide if you would, you can read it easier. So the idea of this pictorial demonstration of what it means to be a disciple, a follower of Christ, is you have Christ at the center of your life, and then you have these spokes in the wheel. And these are the things you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be praying. You're supposed to be witnessing to others. You're supposed to be in the Bible and fellowshipping. You're supposed to be doing these 4 things. And my first sermon I ever preached as a 21-year-old was these 4 things. And if you obey God in doing those 4 things, then you're being a disciple. Okay? And then as I started serving in different positions, I worked at this camp, and at the camp for summer camp, it's called Look Up Lodge in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. And I worked alongside these other counselors, and all the guys were in one building, and we spent a lot of time together, and we worked with a lot of kids, and several of them were in seminary, were older than me. I was just starting college, but they had finished college and were going to seminary. And they introduced me this book called Celebration of Discipline. And it talked about things involving your spiritual life that I'd never thought about. And I don't want to spend a lot of times in it, but it was by Richard Foster. But talking this over and going through some of these things were very pivotal to me in my growth as a Christian. And it talks about the inward disciplines of meditation and prayer and fasting, you know, these things that go on in your life that you kind of do by yourself. And then it talks about the outward disciplines of simplicity and solitude, service and submission, serving others, helping other people. It wasn't just 4 things, it was several things. And these all came from the Bible. And then they used the word corporate disciplines, which things you do together, including worship like we're doing this morning, confession, guidance, and celebration. And so it had these 12 things, and it has descriptions of how to meditate on the scripture and how to meditate and how to pray and how to serve and do these other things, how to live a simple life. And you know, all through my life, I have gone back to some of these disciplines. For instance, I had recently this after we went camping last time, the first 12 hours we were there, it rained and rained and rained. And so I got to thinking, we got back, I'm tired of camping in a tent. I think we ought to get some kind of little thing that we can camp in, some kind of RV. And so then I got to thinking, well, I have to have a truck to pull it. And so I start looking at trucks, and then I start looking at RVs, and then the RV costs this much, and the truck costs this much. And then, I'm showing it to Sharon. Hey, look at this, look at this. And then, she's shaking her head at me, and she said, what's wrong with sleeping in a cot in a tent? And, when you get to thinking about it, I got to thinking about it because I was looking at the simplicity idea. So if I move my house into the woods with me, am I camping? If I take my restroom, my shower, my sink, my TV, everything with me camping in the woods, am I just moving my house into the woods? Anyway, I'm not going to argue with you, but simplicity. And how much money is it going to, for the number of times I get to do that, is it worth the investment of what it costs? good question to ask, but the value of simplicity is supposed to be a Christian value. Okay. Now, as I have gone on in my life and thought about this more, I came across something not long ago called the wisdom pyramid. You've ever heard of the food pyramid? It was popular in the 90s. I think they changed it into My Plate. But they used to have things at the bottom of the pyramid like carbohydrates and then proteins. And then like the desserts were very, very tip top. You're not supposed to eat a lot of that. You're supposed to eat a lot of that. Okay? And this guy came up with this idea that in your life, spiritually, you ought to spend a lot of time in the Bible, time at church, time in nature, enjoying nature, time reading worthy books, and then time on the internet, and then finally social media. Now, this is a little dated because Twitter is no longer a bird, it's an X. I know that, okay? But the idea with the pyramid is that you put this amount of time in your life. A lot of people are spending all their time in social media, all the time in internet. They don't spend any time in the other. And so spiritually, their soul is withering. If you don't eat the right stuff, your body withers. If you don't eat the right, nutritionally right stuff spiritually, you wither, okay? And so these are just some things. And by the way, as I've been going through with this and thinking about the things in my life that grown me, almost all of them were done in conjunction with other people. If you're not in a small group of some kind where people talk and discuss things, not a lecture group, not another sermon where you sit and listen to a lecture and maybe one person comments, maybe two people, filled with 25 or 30 people in the room. I'm talking about a small group of 5 to 8 people that you can share your heart with and talk to them about what's going on in your life and ask them questions, and they can help you because you're all seeking God. That's the way we grow. 3, what keeps us from growing? Okay, well, there's different things. Sin can keep you from not growing, and a lot of different things. There's this parable in the Bible that talks about what keeps people from growing, and often I look at it in the evangelism realm, but I want to look at it in discipleship this time. It's in Mark chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. And it goes like this: And Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd gathered around him was so large, he got into a boat. And he sat in it out on the lake while all the people were along the shore at the water's edge, and he taught them many things by parables. And in his teaching, he said, listen, a farmer went out to sow the seed. And as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. And some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came out, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants so that it did not bear grain. Still other seed fell on the good soil. It came up and grew and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times. And Jesus said, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So I know this is called the parable of the soil, but I'm going to suggest it could also be called the parable of the soul. The parable of the soul. And the seed fell on different kinds of souls. By the way, we use this word for soul sometimes numbers of people on a ship. So how many souls do we have on board? That comes from the Bible. There's a text that talks about people as souls, that all of us have a soul. And this is a parable of different kinds of souls. So first there's the hardened soul, okay? The one that is become hardened. And I don't know if it's any of us, maybe it is. Maybe at one time you were open to growing, you were open to trying to develop your soul, but you've had things happen that's made you a bitter person. Maybe somebody did something against you and it caused your heart to harden. It says Jesus interprets the parable in Mark 4:14, and he says, well, this is what it means. The farmer sows the word, and some people are like seed along the path where the word is sown. And as soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that was sown in them. So even though they started off on the right path and they wanted to become a better soul to follow Christ and grow in their faith, something happened, somebody did something. I often find people who tell me, oh, they used to go to church, but this happened to them, and so they haven't been back since. And that was like 30 years ago. And, I think about if you go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal, do you never go out to eat again? No, you go to a different restaurant. You go to someplace else, but you need the connection that happens in church. You need a group of people to worship with. But sometimes our souls get hard and you make a choice and then you feel like, well, I can't go back on that. Some people don't come to church because they feel like if they come, people are going to say, well, where have you been? Or they might ask them a question about the Bible, and you think, well, I don't know anything. When I first started going to church, I was afraid somebody was going to ask me. I didn't have a Bible, didn't know anything in it. And so we need to be a place where people can come and not feel threatened by those things. If you're here today and you're in that category, you're welcome. I'm glad you're here. Second, there's the shallow soul. That's kind of like, it's not like the soil is just rocky all the way down. It's like it's okay soil, but the soil is real shallow. We were putting in a fence in our backyard, and Mike remembers we went to put in those fence posts. Oh, there's some clay. What is about 2 feet down? And once you get 2 feet down, it is the dickens to bury that post further down because it's so hard. Jesus said, others like seeds sown on rocky places, hear the word, at once rejoice, receive it with joy, but since they have no root, they last only a short time. And when trouble or persecution becomes of the word, then quickly fall away. When trouble happens, something doesn't go like they think it should. Maybe somebody is judgmental. They don't act like they should. They're hypocritical. Listen, everybody's a hypocrite one time or another. It's called being a human. God wants us not to live that way. But when we see it in somebody else, maybe we don't like it because we realize that sometimes we have that in us. But this shallow soul, that it, really into it for about 3 weeks or a month. Well, before we came here, Sharon and I started a church. It was about 20-something years ago. And most of the people in the church were in their 20s. And it was exciting. It was great. But there was a huge turnover. People would come in and they would be very passionate about it, very excited about it. And then after about 2 months, I would never see them again. And I look at that text that I just read and I thought, it's kind of like that. They're excited about it, but they never really commit. And then there's the cluttered soul. As you get busier in life, you feel this way. Somebody told me having kids is kind of like being shot off an aircraft carrier. The day starts that way, especially when school starts. And we get busy. In Mark 4:18, it says, still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness, the wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke it out, make it unfair. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do any of these things I'm talking about, meditate or pray or, read the Bible or be involved in any kind of a small group. I don't have time for that because I'm busy doing this other stuff. You don't understand. And you have a cluttered soul and it withers. It's like a plant withers. If you don't, we have these plants in the front of the church. Don't look at them. They look bad now. I try to water them at the front door of the office. I try to water them, but I forget. And they wither. And they'll come back if you water them. Your soul, wherever it is, condition it is today, it's not too late. It's not too late. God can renew your soul. And then in the last part of the story, it's the healthy soul. It says, others like seed sown on good soil. By the way, it's the same seed. On good soil. Hear the word, accept it, produce a crop, some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. And so in your life today, there are different ways to grow as a faith. In fact, I'm going to show you some of the books I got. Okay, and these are some of my favorite books, and one is John Ortberg's Soul Keeping. It's a great book. Dallas Willard, Renovation of the Heart, and you can watch this on video if you want to write these down. Mark Dever's got a beautiful little book called Discipling. This is the book that was very pivotal in my early life, and he redid it, called Celebration of Discipline, The Path to Spiritual Growth. This is a wonderful book, Disciple Making Church, if you're a leader in the church. And then Dietrich Bonhoeffer's The Cost of Discipleship. Wonderful books. And that's one way is through reading good stuff. But you need the community. You know, I want to end with this story that is, I think, really self-explanatory. There was once a town high in the Alps that straddled the banks of a beautiful stream. The stream was fed by springs of water that were old as the earth and deep as the sea. The water was clear like crystal, and children laughed and played beside it, and swans and geese swam on it, and you could see the rocks and the sand and the rainbow trout that swarmed at the bottom of the stream. Then high in the hills, far beyond anybody's sight, lived an old man who was the keeper of the spring. He had been hired so long ago that no one can remember a time when he wasn't there. And he would travel from one spring to another in the hills, removing branches, fallen leaves, debris that would pollute the water, but his work was unseen. One year, the town council decided that they had better things to do with their money. No one supervised the old man anyway. They had roads to repair, taxes to collect, service to offer. Giving money to an unseen stream cleaner had become a luxury they could not afford. So the old man left his post. High in the mountains, the springs went untended. Twigs and branches and worse muddied the liquid flow. Mud and silt compacted the creek bed. Farm waste turned parts of the stream into stagnant bogs. For a time when no one in the village noticed, but after a while the water was just not the same. It began to look brackish. The swans flew away to live somewhere else. The water no longer had a crisp scent that drew children to play by it. Some people in the town began to grow ill. All noticed the loss of sparkling beauty that used to flow between the banks of the streams that fed the town. The life of the village depended on the stream. The life of the stream depended on the keeper. The city council reconvened. The money was found. The old man was rehired. Yet after yet another time, the springs were cleaned, the streams were pure, children played on its banks, illness was replaced by health. The swans came home and the village came back to life. The life of a village depended on the health of the stream. The stream is your soul, and you're the keeper.